Shumai guys, and welcome back to the Life to the Full podcast, the podcast that helps you make the most of your times here on Earth. My name's Dav Morse, I'm your host. It's good to be back on the airwaves, sharing 7 more tips that you definitely need to avoid. We're in the middle of a little mini-series here on tips you definitely need to avoid in life. We did financial tips that were really bad and you definitely shouldn't follow last week. And this week we are leaning into health tips. Tips about your physical health that you definitely should ignore because they are rubbish tips. These are all things I've heard so-called health experts give as advice, but they really are things you need to avoid listening to. Now I get it, with more people grappling for attention, they need to come up with more and more extreme things to say, and the more controversial, the better. Often the claims are backed up by some semblance of scientific research, but often they are taken completely out of context or to the absolute extreme. So let's hit the first one. First tip you should definitely ignore is, do this one exercise and get 6-pack abs in 6 weeks. Or tighten and flatten your belly with this one exercise, or anything to that effect. I get it, we all want results fast. I do. I'd rather have a stronger body or a sharper mind today, immediately. I'd rather not have to go through the hard work of sculpting my body and crafting my mind for a long time. Having all that good stuff right now would be way better than slaving away at exercising without seeing any progress, right? Apart from the fact that these tips almost never work because they tap into our natural human inclination to want things quickly and easily, they rob you of the journey of becoming someone who has a strong, healthy body and a sharp, learned mind. Sometimes, by the way, I can never say the word learned without thinking of Homer Simpson. You know what I'm talking about. Sometimes it can be beneficial to have a little series of quick wins when you're starting out on your journey, something to keep you going when you feel like giving up. But rather than doing just this one exercise to get 6-pack abs in 6 weeks, set about building an exercise routine that works for you, that you can enjoy, and that will become a lifestyle and a way of life, rather than something you do for 6 weeks, or more likely 1 or 2 weeks, that you'll just give up on. Become the type of person who works out every day. Don't rely on one exercise to fix all your issues. I'm convinced that anyone, given the right support, information, exercises that suit them, can find a lifestyle of healthy living and not have to rely on quick fixes like the tips you should definitely ignore in today's episode. As an aside, I always try and keep in mind a dear friend of mine when I make episodes on physical health. She suffers from debilitating lack of energy and tiredness, so that even short walks of a few hundred meters can take it out of her completely for days. Whatever your situation, find something that works for you. She compensates for her lack of movement by eating incredibly well. She's looking after her body by caring for what she puts in it. She does what she can in terms of exercise, but it's mainly the focus on the eating that keeps her in good shape. So whatever your situation, find a routine that works for you. Find a sport that works for you, be it the gym, cold water swimming, roller derby, walking, free running, baby yoga, whatever. Find someone to keep you accountable, preferably to do it with you, and find a time that works, and you'll be on your way to a physically healthy lifestyle design. Number 2, the second tip, health tip that you should definitely ignore. Stop drinking fruit juice. It's making you obese. And other things like that. I literally did see that one. How can fruit juice be making you obese? Anyway, that's why you should definitely ignore it. There's always someone championing any given food or drink and why it's bad for you. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I said people will latch on to questionable studies, take the abstract of the study and give their own spin on it, which may or may not reflect the researcher's findings, and may or may not even be true. People can easily read a headline like, "Drinking fruit juice makes you obese," and make life choices based on that. We're all busy, we all make choices, we all think about headlines and think, oh, better not do that, better do this, better do that. But what you do by listening to this kind of advice is that you ignore all the benefits that come from drinking orange juice. People might say that you're stripping the fibre out of the fruit and you'll spike your blood sugar levels if you drink the juice. But the fact is that orange juice is full of nutrients and goodness, and you'll miss out on all that stuff if you stop drinking it. Unless you have nailed your nutrition and you are dialed in to eating nothing but vegetables and organ meat and nuts and seeds and seaweed 99.9% of the time, then you absolutely have to ignore this advice. Making a tiny change like eating the whole fruit instead of the juice, or whatever is the tiny change, is not going to move the needle on your nutrition scale. Get the 20% in order that will give you 80% of the benefits first. Then, if said fact is in fact fact, you can then start cranking up the next 80% of effort that will get you the last 20% there. Tip number 3, personal pet peeve of mine, this one. You should definitely ignore this one. Bread is bad for you. Stop eating bread. A lot of people believe this one. A lot of people even have some success with cutting out bread, quote unquote, from their diet. Most of the success actually comes from eating less. People who cut out bread often just eat less for lunch, which results in losing weight. But this is why you should ignore this piece of advice. Bread is not bad for you. The fluffy cotton wool bread-based product you get from the supermarket is awful, though. You definitely shouldn't eat that. And I know I've just made a claim like number 2. The irony is not lost on me. Don't worry. The stuff you buy from the supermarket is not bread. It purports to be bread, but it is in fact a bread substitute, which is nothing like the real thing. Bread from the supermarket is designed to rise quickly, and the gluten doesn't get time to form and break down properly, which is why so many people find that their bodies can't tolerate it. Making bread should be a long process. It's what allows the bread to become digestible. Quickly risen bread is not easily digestible. It's entirely possible that the rise in gluten intolerance, diabetes, IBS, etc. that we've seen over the past decades is in fact down to an increase in consumption of mass-produced bread. So in that sense, please do stop eating bread. I eat bread at least once a day, often twice a day, and I like to consider myself pretty healthy. Eating this much bread has not been in any way bad for my physical health. The difference is that I eat real bread. Bread made with only flour, water and salt. Long fermented sourdough, which is full of flavour and goodness. Bread that has a chewy crumb, a depth of flavour, unmatched by anything pretending to be bread. Bread which you would be happy to eat half a loaf of in one sitting. Bread that hands have made. I love making my own bread. It serves many purposes. It can act as a mindfulness practice. I am in awe of the alchemy and magic that turns flour, water and salt into a delicious loaf every time I make it. It's an outlet for creativity and a way to live by the mantra, create more than you consume. Once you eat real bread, you'll realize what you were eating before isn't even bread, and that the homemade sourdough you can make with 15 minutes of effort is a world apart, and you probably never want to go back again. That's what happened to me. I used to be a white squares only kind of guy. But then I started baking when I was between jobs, And it has been the fourth most consistent thing in my life after Jesus, basketball, and my wife. Yes, in that order. It doesn't take a lot of time, although it does take a lot of time. As in, it takes a long time to ferment and prove, but actually hands-on time is very little. Once you get over the mental hurdle of, oh, I've got to make bread again. Oh, isn't that so hard and complicated? You realize that it's very doable to fit into even the busiest of schedules. So do stop eating bread, but don't stop eating real bread. And if you can't make it yourself every time, support a local bakery who should be happy to talk to you about the bread making process. Tip number 4 for your physical health that is really bad advice, you should definitely ignore it, is all calories are the same, so it doesn't matter what you eat. I've seen this everywhere, this idea that you can eat whatever you want as long as you're in a calorie deficit. There are certain fitness influencers who are pushing the narrative that health and nutrition is way more complicated than calories in versus calories out. Often influencers who are pushing a product. And there are other fitness influencers who take immense joy and satisfaction of rinsing the other fitness influencers and say, these guys are morons pushing a product. If you want to lose weight, just consume fewer calories than you expend, and it's as simple as that. Needless to say, I have no product to push, unless you want an audio course on how to quit teaching and start living, in which case, I've got your back. Link in the description, show notes. And I'm affording myself the right to give a balanced point of view, because my goal isn't maximum engagement, it's helping you make the most of your time here on Earth, living life to the full, which includes living a physically healthy life. Your goals should dictate what you eat. This point was hammered home to me when I saw Tom Stoltman explain what he eats and why. For some context, Tom Stoltman is a 3-time world's strongest man. Sorry if that's a spoiler for you and I've ruined your Christmas. Let's just say he's at least a 2-time world's strongest man. His goal is to be the absolute strongest beast that he can be, so he eats with that as his goal. That means he needs to eat so many calories that he can have enough energy to perform at the highest level and grow his muscles and strength. He'll wake up and smash an entire bag of Skittles before breakfast. He hasn't got the time to eat enough lean fat to provide him with all the calories he needs, so he ditches the chicken breast and brown rice in favour of a couple of burgers and chips. Now this might be getting him really strong and able to perform at the highest level of World's Strongest Man, but that's not necessarily doing his long-term health any good. Another World's Strongest Man, Eddie Hall, actually gave up competing in strongman competitions because of health concerns. The question is for you, what are you optimizing for when it comes to your eating? The calories in, calories out model oversimplifies nutrition. In fact, the calories in, calories out model doesn't address nutrition at all. The source of your calories matters because different foods affect your metabolism, hunger, overall health differently. For example, 100 calories of sugary snacks affect your body differently than 100 calories of vegetables. The sugary snacks might spike your blood sugar levels in the short term and leave you more susceptible to eating more calories later. So yes, it might be true that eating fewer calories than you burn is the only way to lose weight, if that's your goal. Eating healthily can actually help that. Eating healthily can improve your longevity, lower risk of all-cause mortality, increase vitality, and all sorts of other good stuff. Just don't become that guy who used to be really fun when you ate unhealthily and became really miserable when you became healthy. Eat for enjoyment as well. Tip number 5, you should definitely ignore this. More exercise is always better. For most people whose physical health is poor or in decline through lack of exercise, then of course, more exercise is better. I'm not always a fan of government guidelines, but aiming for 150 minutes of exercise per week seems like a reasonable goal to me. If you're not hitting that target, ask yourself, how can I take more care of my physical health and make a habit out of doing at least 150 minutes of exercise per week? While regular exercise is important, too much can lead to overtraining, injuries, and burnout. I have myself suffered injuries from overtraining. I went to see a specialist about my foot injury, which I suffered from too much intense running. And the guy who was helping me get better was a former Ironman age group athlete who competed at the World Championships in Kona, had to retire from Ironman racing because his knees were ruined from too much running on hard surfaces. His words, not mine. And once again, the irony of the situation is not lost on me. This was one of the reasons I transitioned away from training for 10 hours a week, which is incredibly little for an Ironman athlete, to a more balanced regime. I'm optimizing for a more rounded physical fitness and choosing activities that I can continue to do into my 80s and beyond. As I'm getting older, I'm increasingly appreciating the importance of recovery. Now that I'm in my 40s, I don't need to train like I'm in my 20s. Recovery is just as important as the workout itself. Finding a balance that allows your body to rest and repair is crucial for long-term health. There are more days these days when my body's telling me I need more recovery time, so I'll opt for a different kind of session, one that is possibly shorter or less intense, or simply one that focuses on flexibility rather than strength and conditioning. So consider your own goals when it comes to exercise. Work to your goals, not goals society or anyone else has set for you. Number 6. Sixth tip you should definitely ignore because it's a really bad tip. Don't lift weights. You don't want to get too big. This is advice more commonly offered to ladies rather than men. There's a myth that the female body becomes less attractive if it's too muscular. Big, strong muscles tend to be associated with a more masculine body type, but there's nothing unfeminine about being strong. In fact, if you're big and strong, it says a lot about your discipline, your attitude towards your health, and your attitude towards consistency, and care for yourself. But that's not the reason you shouldn't listen to this advice. The first reason you should ignore people who say you should not lift weights because you don't want to get too big is that getting big is actually really hard. Guys go to the gym for years to try and get big, and don't, because it takes so much more than just going to the gym and lifting weights to get big. You need to eat a lot and a lot of the right stuff if you want to get big. So don't worry. You won't start lifting and suddenly become massive. But you should absolutely lift weights and to strengthen and do resistance training. There's a whole load of cardiovascular benefits, decreased risk of all-cause mortality, higher confidence, increased metabolism. Lifting weights helps you live longer. Keeping your muscles and muscle strength into your later years keeps you freer from injury, less prone to hurting yourself, and more able to do the tasks you want to do for longer. I did a whole episode on you should lift weights, but why? Which you should definitely go back and listen to. It's episode 36. I just did go back and listen to it, and I really enjoyed it. Perhaps you will too. Even if you listened to it before, it's a nice little reminder. Number 7, last one. 7th tip for physical health you definitely need to ignore is cardio is all you need. For years I was a triathlete. My wife basically told me a year into our marriage, either just book a triathlon or stop going on about something you will never do. So that was it. I booked our first triathlon, which we did together, and for the next 13 years had a weekly rhythm of swim, bike, run, culminating in finishing Ironman Wales in 2019. It worked well. I felt fit. I had great endurance, but as I've already mentioned, it wasn't going to be sustainable long term. And as I've mentioned on the podcast before, I didn't realize I was missing the benefits of other types of training. So what are you optimizing for? At the time, I was optimizing for completing Ironman, and that's what I had to do if I was going to reach my goal of becoming an Ironman. There are no solutions, only trade-offs. Now my trade-off is that my endurance for cycling 100 miles is diminishing. But that's what I'm happy to do at this stage of life. What can you do to increase your non-cardio training? Is it more strength training? Is it mobility-based? Do you want to become more flexible? As always, make it easy to commit to. Ask yourself, what will this look like if it's easy? What would this look like if it was fun? I've had a lot of fun today putting together this episode. Hope you've had a bit of fun, bit of light entertainment for you. I appreciate your time. You can buy my course, Quit Teaching, Start Living, if you want, or don't. Don't worry about it. But I do want you to say hi on Instagram. David Morse, Life to the Full podcast. It's really nice to see over the last couple of weeks more people tuning in, more people joining us, listening in. So do say hello. I'd love to hear from you. What are your responses to this episode? Get in touch. Next time, we are going to be looking at 7 pieces of really bad mental health advice that you should definitely ignore. So stay tuned. Listen out for that one. See you next time. Peace out.